ATF also said that it had received more than 80,000 public comments, and that an overwhelming number were critical of the proposal. Now, of course, in Sunday's broadcast, I went into a little more detail, but one of the things that I really, really pushed forward was the idea of not counting your chickens before they hatch, not thinking that this was over. The bottom line is we will see if this is a victory for the Second Amendment or just a stall tactic until they come back and try it again, just a little more quietly next time. Well, they decided to come full force without being that quiet. As of yesterday being Monday, a small group of Democrats have now proposed into conference legislation that would ban this same ammo and some other ammo that they insist are armor piercing. Now, as of right now, I tentatively have Cody Stockton, Master Gunsmith, scheduled to be on Sunday's broadcast in the second hour. We're still trying to get finalized, go with that, but whether he can this upcoming Sunday or if he ends up coming on later, we're going to talk about the fact that these particular ammunition rounds, they're not particularly good at armor piercing. In fact, being armor piercing is something that they're not really. The fact that they can go through body armor, they can only go through the lowest level, weakest, most puny types of body armor. And even then, there's some questions. We've discussed this at some length, and he's going to bring all the facts, information, spreadsheet, the whole 9 yards. We're going to talk about it. We're going to be involved in the conversation, so I hope that you'll join us with that. Also, as of right now, I have locked a guest for Sunday in the first hour, a gentleman by the name of Senator Silk. He's a state senator from Oklahoma. He is a Republican, and he has introduced a bill to protect small businesses from legal consequences of acting on religious objections. As a result of him being lead sponsor of the bill, there's been a strong pushback in the state of Oklahoma from the gay and lesbian community. Some of them took it pretty extreme, and they have issued death threats against him and his children, for crying out loud. So he's going to be coming on, and he's going to talk to us about the proposed legislation in question. We'll spend some time discussing that, get the ins and outs, the facts about the bill, and then we will talk about that reaction and find out exactly to what extent this pushback has been and where the feelings are. Because to me, we talked about this a little bit in Conspiracy Corner last Sunday, and that's the fact that we've gotten to the point now where it seems to be okay to go after the kids too. No. We've got to return back to respect for one another, but we at the very least need to have some level of common decency so that we don't go after the kids. So be sure to tune in Sunday in the first hour to hear us talk to Senator Silk. And hopefully, like I said, right now, tentatively, we're on in the second hour with Cody Stockton, and we'll have that discussion then. But like I said, if something happens and he's unavailable, we will have him in an upcoming Sunday coming very soon. I didn't really want to rehash everything from last Sunday. There are some issues, though, however, that I felt compelled to go ahead and talk about. Wanted to touch on that. And I wanted to touch on the Sunday show, I do a segment called Outrage of the Week. And unfortunately, several weeks, I have at least two. It gets to be that bad sometimes. I also do a segment called Headlines You May Have Missed. I'm not going to go into that. If you want to check that out, I implore you, look me up on Stitcher.com or TuneIn.com and look for the broadcast titled Supreme Court of the United States and Obamacare, bullet ban goes bust and flags are still flying. You can listen into that. You'll hear a lot of what we've just discussed on these other cases. And you'll also hear about this. But for those of you who won't, I feel employed to get to... This was the first outrage of the week this past Sunday, and I'm still bothered by this tremendously, and I want to discuss that. If anybody wants to hop into the chat room and discuss this with me once we get started as well, you're welcome to. If you'd like to send a message via the website, you're also welcome to. But this bothers me on so many levels. An 8-year-old child bride died in Yemen last week on her wedding night after suffering internal injuries due to sexual trauma. Human rights organizations are calling for the arrest of her husband, who was 5 times her age. The man was in his 40s, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the reports say that the death occurred in the tribal area of Harith. At least I hope that's close enough to pronunciation. No disrespect meant. My East Tennessee tongue has a hard time with some Arabic sounds, so forgive me. But it's a tribal area in northwestern Yemen. It happens to border Saudi Arabia. Now, this brings even more attention to the already existing issue of forced child marriages in the Middle East. If you'll remember, we have talked about a couple of deaths of child brides due to sexual trauma on this show before. It happens a lot more than most Western citizens could imagine. According to the United Nations Population Fund, between 2011 and 2020, they're looking forward just a little bit. I'm not sure how they're managing their projections, but according to the report, more than 140 million girls will become child brides. And of that 140 million girls who will marry before the age of 18, at least 50 million will be under the age of 50. It's reported that over a quarter of Yemen's young girls are married before the age of 15, and not only do they lose access to health care and education, but these child brides are commonly subjected to physical, emotional, and sexual violence in their forced marriages. One of the main issues is that there is currently no consistent, established definition of a child. We don't have a definition of child, a legal age, if you will, agreed upon worldwide. This leaves various interpretations within countries and little protection for those who are affected. Establishing an age limit is among the top priorities of groups like the HRC, which was responsible for publishing a 54-page report, How Come You Allow Little Girls to Get Married? Yep, that was the name of the report. Sounds like a crazy question to me, but at any rate, this 54-page report documented the lifelong damage to girls who were forced to marry at young ages. Most pro-age limit organizations agree that 18 should be the legal age for marriage. In February of 2009, a law was created in Yemen that set the minimum age for marriage at 17. Unfortunately, it was repealed after more conservative lawmakers called it un-Islamic. Now that, of course, begs the question, what makes that un-Islamic? Okay, so hold on to your hats, folks, because here's the part where I get a whole new round of death threats. It's because Muhammad, the prophet of Islam, Muhammad was a pedophile. After his first wife died, he married a very young girl. He did wait at least a year before consummating the marriage, but she was still under the age of 10. What a guy. Bottom line is, as far as the people living under stricter interpretations of Sharia, Muhammad did it, so that makes it okay for anyone else living under Sharia law to do the same thing. I personally don't believe that an international minimum age for marriage would stop the sick individuals who insist on practicing this barbaric behavior in the name of the religion of peace. This is another strong argument as to why Sharia courts must never be allowed in the United States. And any that are already operating must be ended immediately. And, just on a side note, on the topic of Sharia courts in America, a lot of the folks that listen to the show regularly probably already know about the so-called Sharia court that's been established in Irving, Texas. Well, in a make no mistake about it statement, the mayor of Irving, Beth Van Dwyne, said, quote, Sharia law court was not approved or enacted by the city of Irving. Recently, there have been rumors suggesting that the city of Irving has somehow condoned, approved, or enacted the implementation of a Sharia law court in our city. Let me be clear. Neither the city of Irving, our elected officials, or city staff have anything to do with the decision of the mosque that has been identified as starting the Sharia court. She also voiced her strong support for further legislation that would outlaw foreign law in Texas. So, way to go, Mayor. Good job. Somebody needs to stand up for these people. And this is mind-boggling to me. The fact that this behavior goes on and there are still people in this country that refuse to see the inherent dangers of those who would insist on Sharia. I also wanted real quick to talk about the second outrage of the week from last week, just in case you missed it. You can stop me if you heard it. But again, like I said, I know a lot of the folks that catch the show here don't catch it there. And this one's pretty sickening too. I beyond outraged with this as well. You see, there's a group of Democrats that are attempting to block a bill that was designed to help victims of human trafficking. Want to take a guess why? Well, you see, these Democrats are trying to block this bill because it doesn't include funding for abortions. Yes, that's right. There is absolutely no doubt that abortion is one of the holy sacraments in the Church of Liberalism. It must be paid for by taxpayer dollars and must be done if you want them or not. Funny thing here is that the Democratic senators on the Judiciary Committee supported the bill. But, big surprise though, it's been hinted at that perhaps, just perhaps, maybe they didn't read the bill. They didn't seem to realize that it barred federally funded abortions. And I'm sorry, does anybody else hear Nancy Pelosi in the background right now? You have to pass the bill so that you can find out what's in it. At any rate, the legislation in question breezed through the Senate Judiciary Committee. But now that it's slated for consideration on the floor, pro-abortion activists are up in arms about how funds for human trafficking victims won't pay for killing babies. The objection is offensive to the victims of human trafficking and the millions of girls and young women around the world who are victimized by it, putting abortions ahead of meeting their needs. The objection should be offensive to every thinking, feeling human, though, not just the victims. The fact that our government would spend money on something that should be handled by private organizations private charities is another argument altogether, and one that I would